Okay, I understand that you studied in the field of child cognitive psychology. Can you tell me what your main focus was?
Sure. So, my main focus for my graduate research was looking at children's ability to reason about rules. So, how kids between the ages of 3 and 8 understand rules, understand the way that authority figures are linked to rules, and understand the consequences of following rules. And we looked at how kids reason about rules, whether their success in understanding a rule is based on whether the rule was made by an authority figure or made by another child, and how this linked to children's ability to take other people's perspectives. So if kids were better at understanding rules, were they also better at perspective taking?
Okay, perfect. And how did you become interested in the field of psychology?
Um, that was kind of funny. When I was in first year undergrad, I sort of just took a wide range of courses, like many people do who are in an arts program undergrad, which is you're not sure exactly what you're going to go into, and so you take a bunch of different courses, and psychology was just one of them. At the time, I think my major, I was actually in first year, I had a double major in philosophy and drama, and I didn't really expect that I would like psychology, and then I just loved it, and when I started learning about psych in first year, it just really, really gripped me, and I saw how interesting it was. And at the time, I thought I was actually going to want to be actually a child psychologist, so somebody who saw patients, who worked with kids, who diagnosed things, who gave therapy. Like, that's what I thought I would be. And along the way, in undergrad, I started doing research as part of the requirements of the program, and I realized how much I loved research and how much, as I learned more about it, I actually did not want to be a therapist. I wanted to be a researcher, and so that's what I ended up pursuing in graduate school, and then it just kind of went from there.
Okay, and one of the things I'm looking for in my project is theory of mind. I understand that you did some work in this field. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Sure. So, theory of mind, as you probably know, theory of mind is all about children's understanding of other people as mental beings. So, the extent to which kids understand that other people, each individual person, has their own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, emotions, and that just because I feel a certain way doesn't mean that you feel a certain way.
Right.
And, things that are quite intuitive to adults, but how kids develop that understanding and the age at which they get different understandings within that kind of umbrella of theory of mind. And so my research in particular looked at children's understanding of false belief, which is called the false belief task. It's all about the extent to which kids understand that other people may believe something that they know is not true. So the most kind of well-known task that's associated with this, it's called the false belief task, and it's where you give children, for example, you show them a box of crayons, and you say to them, "What's in the box?" And they say crayons, of course, because it's a familiar box to them. And you open up the box, and you show them that, in fact, there aren't crayons inside. There's something else inside, like candles. And you say to them, "Yeah, I had all these candles, and I had nowhere to put them, so I took this empty crayons box, and I put them in here."
Mm-hmm.
Put them back in the box, and then you say, "Child, what's in the box?" And they say crayons. And you say, "Danielle has never seen inside this box before. If I show her this box, what will she think is inside of it before she opens it?" And what we found, and this study has been done hundreds of times with kids, and 3-year-old kids almost always fail this task. They will say, "Danielle is going to think that there's crayons inside." That's wrong. They would say, "Danielle is going to think that there's candles inside." When in fact Danielle would have no reason to think that there's candles inside because there's crayons on the front of the box.
Right.
And 5-year-olds would almost always say she's going to think that there's crayons inside. It's somewhere between the ages of 3 and 5, around 4 or 4.5, that kids develop this understanding that other people may hold a false belief. A 3-year-old is just not capable. As soon as the 3-year-old knows herself that there's candles in there, she cannot imagine that anybody else out there would actually not know that. She cannot put herself in the other person's shoes and say, "You know what, that person may think something that is in fact not true." Even if you say to the kid, "Remember a minute ago when I first showed you this box, what did you first think was inside before we opened it?" Now, the kid a minute ago told you crayons. the 3-year-old will tell you, I thought there were candles. I always knew there were candles. As soon as you tell them that there are candles, they can't imagine anybody not knowing that. By age 5, they totally get it. So it's a really cool phenomenon. And what research is that kids who pass the false belief task earlier tend to have more sophisticated language skills, tend to have higher quality friendships. Unfortunately, they also tend to be more likely to bully other kids because they're more manipulative.
Okay.
And what I was kind of looking at in my research, and now I've sort of gone off topic and told you a little bit more about theory of mind research, but what I was looking at in my research is, might it also be the case that children who pass that task earlier are also likely to have a better understanding of rules. And that is kind of what I was looking at, and also what I found. So children who have a more sophisticated theory of mind also tend to, in the preschool years, also tend to have a better understanding of rules.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. And then the next question is, are you up to date on some of the recent theory of mind research? And if so, can you tell me a bit about it?
Sure. So I think I sort of just
answered
that a little bit by accident. Sorry. So a lot of the research on theory of mind, there were so many manipulations at the beginning. 30 years ago when people first discovered theory of mind, all they were doing were different versions of that crayons box task. Could we find a way to figure out exactly what's behind it? Now researchers are quite convinced that the false belief phenomenon is in fact a true thing. 3-year-olds don't get it, 5-year-olds do, and it's somewhere in between that kids really start to develop this understanding. And so where the research has really gone since then is trying to look at, first of all, what about kids who never get it? And so, children with certain kinds of diagnoses, for example, autism as an example, children with autism often don't have a strong understanding of the social world. And one of the things that you sometimes see is that children with autism don't pass theory of mind tasks even when they're older. And so research has kind of been looking at that, looking at possible interventions for that,
Okay.
and then also really looking at what are the other factors that are related. So as I was telling you, friendship quality, language ability, what do we know kind of correlates or is related to theory of mind, and that's kind of the way the research has gone.
Okay, great. And what do you do now with your degree?
So I teach, I do 2 things. I am an instructor at U of T. I teach developmental educational psychology primarily to teachers in the in teacher education programs at U of T. So both in our 5-year concurrent teacher education program and our 1-year postgraduate program, I teach developmental and educational psychology. I also do some educational research for a company called Aberia Consult. We do research typically in schools. It's more applied research, and what that means is it's not kind of lab research like I was doing in graduate school when I was kind of looking at theory of mind.
Right.
This is more applied in that it's happening in schools, and we're trying to kind of evaluate the effectiveness of certain programs that are in place in school to try to improve them. So, let's say a school decides we're going to put into place an after-school homework club for parents to come with their kids. We want to know, we're putting money into this program. After 6 months, we want to figure out, has it actually worked? Did it have an impact? That's the kind of research that I'm doing, helping schools figure out whether they're making good decisions.
Okay, perfect. And what do most people do with a PhD in child psychology once they do graduate?
It kind of depends whether they are a clinician or a researcher. So the program that I was in graduate school, I was in a research stream program where they're really gearing you up to become either an academic, so to work in a university and to teach and do research. The other side is where you can actually go into a clinical psychology program where you become a clinician, where you see patients and do more of kind of therapy, diagnosis, that sort of thing. So it sort of depends, and one would take you into more of a research and academic job, and the other would be more of a therapy, either at a hospital or in a private practice, and it kind of just depends what kind of psychologist you are.
Okay, and I'm making a general website on children's cognitive development, and one of the other things I'm looking at is mirror self-recognition. What can you tell me about this?
Sure. So what we know about mirror self-recognition is that's something that tends to happen around a year and a half of age. The kids start to understand